Good evening and thanks for joining us here on ABC 10 Plus for a news update on the death of Jimmy Carter. I'm Luke Clary. The former U.S. president and Nobel Peace Prize winner has died at the age of 100 after spending more than a year in hospice care. This is video of Jimmy Carter throughout the years. He served as the 39th president of the United States from 1977 to 1981. Known as a Georgia peanut farmer, he served one term in the White House before building a reputation as a global humanitarian and champion of democracy. This is a look at Plains, Georgia tonight. This was Jimmy Carter's hometown. During his presidency, Carter struggled with a bad economy and the Iran hostage crisis, but brokered peace between Israel and Egypt. He's also a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Earlier, the flag was lowered at the White House following the announcement of the death of President Jimmy Carter. President Joe Biden spoke about Carter and his accomplishments tonight.
You know, Jimmy Carter stands as a model of what it means to live a life of meaning and purpose, a life of principle, faith, and humility. His life dedicated to others. You know, he was like my dad. He thought that, he said, Joey, your job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about dignity, your dignity. About being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, everything's going to be okay. He believed, as I do, and many as you do, that that's absolutely possible.
Biden added that he has spoke with the Carter's children, family, and friends. A service will be held in Washington, D.C. President-elect Donald Trump saying tonight, in part, quote, the challenges Jimmy faced as president came at a pivotal time for our country, and he did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. For that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude. Melania and I are thinking warmly of the Carter family and their loved ones during this difficult time. These are videos from ABC 10's archive of Jimmy Carter. Carter visited the Sacramento area several times during his campaigns for president. Former California Governor Jerry Brown unsuccessfully ran against Carter for the Democratic presidential nomination in 1976. Ronald Reagan won the presidential election in 1980 against Carter. This photo shows Sacramento political analyst Steve Swat interviewing Jimmy Carter back in the 1970s when no one knew much about the former president. Steve Swat, who covered politics as a journalist back then, says Carter made many trips to Sacramento trying to make a name for himself.
That picture was taken in room 1190 at the state capitol, where I interviewed then candidate Jimmy Carter, and he had come to Sacramento to seek support from members of the legislature who were Democrats, and Jerry Brown, who actually he had fought with late in that campaign, and they actually came together and campaigned together at the very end when he came to Sacramento. And nobody knew anything about Jimmy Carter in California, except for the fact that, yes, he was a one-term governor of Georgia and a peanut farmer and a church deacon. And yet he comes to California and everybody is thinking, this guy is running for president.
Carter ended up beating former Governor Brown and Gerald Ford on his path to the White House. And during my conversation with Steve Swat, he says that he once fell in front of Jimmy Carter at the rail yards during an event, and Carter stopped to help him up. Carter is being widely remembered as an accommodating guy. Tonight, ABC 10 spoke to Les Francis, who was the deputy chief of staff in the Carter administration. He now lives in Cameron Park.
Guy was the smartest guy I ever met, just brain power, right? But that's not as important as the character issues. Enormous decency, absolutely honest. Sometimes honest to a fault in the sense of being willing to say things that were not popular. So one would hope that with his passing, people will reflect on the qualities of decency and service and courage.
Governor Gavin Newsom is also remembering Jimmy Carter. In a statement this afternoon, the governor said in part, quote, a tireless champion for human rights and democracy whose unparalleled life of service made the world a better place. President Carter was a man of rare character whose beliefs ran true and ran deep, whose moral compass never wavered. Jimmy Carter is also being remembered as the longest living U.S. president. He had 4 children, many grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. His wife, Rosalind Carter, passed away last year. Our sister station in Atlanta, Georgia, is helping remember Jimmy Carter and his life and legacy tonight.
Although Plains, Georgia has made its mark as the birthplace and home of Jimmy Carter, the boy who grew up to become president actually spent his formative years in a place even smaller than Plains, 2 miles away in an unincorporated and predominantly black community called Archery.
During the dry season, when we were cultivating crops and planting and cultivating and harvesting, we were extremely busy in the field. And Daddy was a very good taskmaster. He taught me the benefits of hard work.
Daddy was Earl Carter, a larger-than-life farmer who successfully ran a country store in Archery and an agricultural warehouse in downtown Plains. Mama was Lillian Carter, a spirited woman who worked as a small-town nurse. When he graduated from Plains High School, Jimmy Carter went to a community college in nearby Americus, then Georgia Tech. But Earl Carter wanted his son to go to the Naval Academy, and 2 years later, Carter received a wartime appointment. It put Jimmy Carter in U.S. Navy submarines and sent him around the world. He would marry Rosalind Smith, a hometown girl who grew up just a few doors away from the Carter family. A few years later, Carter returned home and entered the world of politics. His first victory was a state Senate seat.
I was able to get a 4-year college approved in Americus, our county seat, and that got me reelected without any opposition. And then I decided to run for the U.S. Congress against a Republican incumbent, Bo Calloway, who was from West Point, and he was an antagonist of mine in many ways. He withdrew from the congressional race and left me with the congressional race won. I decided he wanted to run for governor. I decided to run for governor against Calloway, so I ran for governor 66 and lost.
And against Lester Maddox.
And against Lester Maddox.
Lester Maddox was a fiery segregationist who didn't get enough votes to win the election, but became governor after the legislature stepped in. Carter went back to Plains and plotted to run for governor again. It was a race that shook the state in 1970. This time, he won.
I say to you quite frankly that the time for racial discrimination is over.
Carter's inauguration speech stunned his listeners, but that speech, as well as his 4 years as governor, gave him a reputation as a new kind of Southern politician.
People were looking for someone that was not from Washington.
Jay Hakes, another early key Carter supporter, was impressed immediately with Carter's command of detail on major issues. Hakes believes it was Carter's status as a Washington outsider and his faith-based ethics that resonated with most voters as he was running for president.
We now have a projected winner in the presidential election. NBC News projects James Earl Carter of the state of Georgia elected the next president of the United States.
When Jimmy Carter brought his good intentions into the White House,
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear that
he began with an ambitious agenda. President Carter attacked the energy crisis, fuel shortages, and rising prices. He created the Department of Energy. He told us we all must do our part.
All of us must learn to waste less energy.
This was the president who, in March of 1979, engineered the Middle East Peace Treaty, just 6 months after the preliminary agreements were first reached at Camp David, one of the greatest diplomatic achievements in U.S. history.
Carter's involvement was very, very necessary, and this brought peace between Egypt and Israel that has lasted to this day.
Jimmy passed more legislation than any president except Lyndon Johnson since the World War II. Good legislation. We're making friends in the world.
Most presidents, after they're done with office, they're playing golf, they're on the lecture circuit sometimes, they serve on corporate boards. He made it a mission to continue what he thought was important to the world.
And what was important? First, fighting for justice.
The most enjoyable and exciting, challenging things are when we break down those barriers and reach out to others.
The Carter Center since 1989 has worked with 38 countries to monitor and ensure fairness in nearly 100 democratic elections. On the other side of the planet, guinea worm disease has affected millions. Carter championed its removal, and in 3 decades, the number of cases dropped to dozens. The only other disease eradicated ever, smallpox. And with every cause, Carter aimed big. In 1976, a humble husband and wife in the humble city of Americus, Georgia, founded a humble nonprofit, Habitat for Humanity. The goal? To build houses for those in need. It remained humble until it courted a former president. His approach to Habitat reflected his outlook overall, affecting the world and never forgetting its roots. It is the strength of a global icon, the strength of a man from Plains, Georgia.
Habitat for Humanity Sacramento is remembering Jimmy Carter tonight. They shared this photo with ABC 10 when the Carters visited Sacramento. The Sacramento chapter's president says, quote, "I don't know if it would be the organization it is today without him." We are continuing to remember Jimmy Carter on ABC 10 Plus. Look for extended coverage on the streaming app, including video from the archives, including Jimmy Carter teaching Sunday school. He did so about 5 years ago at his church in Plains, Georgia. You can find the full clip on the streaming app. Thank you for joining us. I'm Luke Clary.